Jay Collins with the Dental Lab. Thanks for the time together. We're going to talk today about polished zirconia, the nano zirconia. Really what we are after is results where you can open up a crown out of the box, put it in the patient's mouth, perfect contacts, perfect occlusion. That's what every lab wants. That's what every doctor wants. Obviously, we're in the business of fighting for perfection. We don't always get perfection. What we want to avoid is rescheduling the patient. No doctor wants to make that call. No lab wants to make that call. We want to avoid open contacts and heavy adjustments, so, heavy occlusal contacts. We don't like those. We don't like bulky margins. What we're going after is a crown. You open up out of the box, stick it in, perfect contacts. So it's on-time delivery. These are the big three, Jay. Maybe chime in here. Do you think these are the big three for doctors, that the crown's on time, there's no adjustment, and it's going to be good for patient health?
I would agree, Rob, completely. What we're trying to achieve for our clinicians is we want the crown to literally jump out of the box into the patient's mouth, right? That's the ultimate goal. If they can have a seat time under 10 minutes, that's when we know we've been successful. We have everything so dialed in our facility. If doctors complain it's taking more than 10 minutes to seat a crown, there's something up. There's something wrong. It's either on the impression side, the scan side, or it's on our side with the manufacturing, because the type of clinicians we're serving these days are, one, super hyper researched, understand everything that's going on in the lab, understand more than they ever had about digital, but number two, have less time than they ever had with the type of schedules they're keeping. So yeah. To have those big three is the key.
Super huge. Obviously, there's more things to talk about, but I think these are the big three. So Jay, thanks for the partnership with the Harvest Nano Zirconia. So we're going to dive into the why behind it, the how behind it, and everything that it does. Here is a monolithic Harvest Nano Zirconia crown, polished, looks amazing, but we're going to travel back in time a little bit, maybe 15 years. I mean, there's some doctors still doing this today. Call it the digilog workflow, right? We start with an impression, you have a little digital in the middle, and then you got some analog at the end. Jay, what percentage of your doctors are using this workflow versus iOS scanning?
We're probably under 40%.
Nice.
We have broke the 60% threshold pretty consistently with digital scanning. And I think there always will be a place for some form of impression in the operatory, but it's going to get less and less with every rendition of intraoral scanning.
Absolutely. And Jay, if you could wave a magic wand and make all your doctors get iOS, I'm assuming you would want them all to have iOS for the most
100%. It cuts out 3 days.
Yeah.
Literally just 3 days in transit, right, Rob? I know you have a lot of experience in the lab space. But you're going to knock out so much inconsistencies just by introducing that scanner, right?
It's huge. iOS scanning is huge. So let's pretend, Jay, Mr. Elon came in to consult, and we presented, hey, here's our process flow. How do we make things better, faster, better, more efficient? Well, we know Elon has a passion for innovation through deletion or through simplification, right? Raptor 1, maybe it got the rocket to launch, but they reinvented to Raptor 2. And that's what Elon's all about. And so let's start with, why do we use stone models? Okay, well, of course you have to if you have an impression, right? Back to here, you got the impression, you got the stone models. We know stone models are not perfect, but I think we'd all agree that this is a great starting point. If doctors and labs want to get more efficient, any consultant would say, get digital, get iOS on the front end of the curve. So you got digital coming in faster, better, right? This is really, really good. But then Elon comes back and says, guys, we can do better. We can delete more.
And I think one of the reasons why you want to delete, that step is, I don't think a lot of people truly understand how inaccurate pouring a model can be, right? Yes, we do it under a vacuum. Yes, we use a device like an Armand Gerbach Smart Box. But at the end of the day, if it's a summer day and there's more humidity in the air versus less in a winter day, it's going to throw off the ratio, no matter what material you use.
Just a little bit. Yep.
Just a little bit, and we're asked as dental technicians to make perfection, consistently, and art, and it's a tough science. It really is. So the more things we can pull out of the equation, I don't know, Rob, how you found it, the more accurate and the more consistent the product will become.
Yeah, it's that error stacking, right? You have a small chance of error and then you compound it through all the steps in the lab. By the time you get to the end, I mean, that could be a full millimeter or 2 full millimeters, which is a mile in the mouth, right?
Absolutely.
And
And then as troubleshooting, if you have, like we have to use logic and reason, right? So if we have a clinician that says, hey, your contact's always open, I have issues. It's like, okay, well, we look at the whole production line. Is he or she the only doctor complaining about this? Is he or she the only doctor in the Philadelphia area complaining about this? Is he or she the only doctor in the East Coast complaining about this? And how do we handle that, right? And as
yeah,
we go, right? And then if we have all that error stacking, all right, so once we figure out, okay, it's something laboratory that has to be diagnosed. Where do you start? It
yes.
makes it more difficult. The more moving parts, the less hard, the less likely you are to hit the target.
That's a great point. The more you do the error stacking, the more complex it is to get to root cause, root solution, because there's like 10 places to look. But if we can whittle it down to maybe 3 places to look,
Correct.
it gets a lot easier to find root problem, root solution. So Elon comes back and says, guys, you're only at Raptor 2. You got to get to Raptor 3. So we go back here and we say, okay, geez, well, we can't get rid of, scanning, designing, and milling. We can probably look at stain and glaze and final QC on 3D printed models. And so here's a controversial question, Jay. Why do we put digitally made crowns on a 3D printed model? Why do you think we
Be,
still do that?
because we want to make our chairside folks comfortable. I have,
Tradition?
yep, a tradition. It's what we always done. I have a mentor. His name's Dr. Keith LeBeau. He ran a nice sized DSO called DCA, and now he's in charge of Delta Dental in New Jersey and in Connecticut. And he always explained to me when he was at U of P and he was in education and doing, if the doctor would take the crown off the model that fit perfectly and put it in the patient's
Mm.
mouth that didn't fit, the doctor's natural reaction was to put it back on the model and look at it, like hold it up and look at it and see what they can see. And he would get frustrated with his young docs. He goes, do you think there's a lab in the world that's going to send a crown out that doesn't fit the model? All right. He goes, it reminded him, he said it looked like somebody, a monkey looking at a combination lock for the first time. He's like, this isn't going to work, and as funny as that sounds, it's true. Right. And we had to develop 3D printing models because when we were sending it back modelless, there wasn't a comfort level. People would see it without the model and be, oh, that's not going to fit in the mouth right away,
Well, and
right?
like if you're doing a PFM with hand stacked porcelain,
100%.
right? There's some reasons why you would need a 3D printed model, but monolithic, full contour zirconia, super accurate. Do we need a 3D printed model?
Absolutely not. It's actually going to go the other way. It's going to impinge on your restoration, because there's not a technician out there that's going to trust that 3D printed model. It is probably the least accurate thing we do in the dental lab space. You think pouring stone model work is, have a consistency issue. You should try 3D printing.
3D printing can be accurate, but there's variabilities that cause inaccuracies. Let's dive into that topic. So milling versus printing. Some different AI research I've done. I've talked to a few milling experts. Milling accuracy is about 5 to 15 microns. Good tool, calibrated mill, and this is a monolithic zirconia crown. What this means is if I mill a crown and then I scanned it and heat mapped it back to the source file, it would
Correct.
have an accuracy of about 5 to 15 microns. If I 3D printed a model, scanned it, heat mapped it back to the source file, it'd have about a 40 to 80 micron variable. Are these ranges about in the
100,
ballpark for you?
100% accurate. Correct.
So there's a difference between milling and printing. And then to make it, further discuss this, we got a glaze layer that's 30 to 50 microns.
Well,
You want to jump in
and
on that?
yeah, because it's, technicians, and I love them, raised by them. My family's full of them. They're, they're a strange group of people. I literally have technicians that they get sintered crowns to check, right? Like, so all they're supposed to check is the crown, that there's no chip margin, there's no microfractures, any of that before it goes into the polishing unit, right? That's all they're supposed to check. And they cannot help themselves by going right to the lathe or the handpiece with it because they're just not happy with the contours. They can't, they can't.
Yep.
We've had to literally have QC stations and we've removed hand pieces and lathes because that's just their natural reaction. It's like, well, I wouldn't have designed it like that. Let me just tighten this angle up real quick. So not only does the glaze, when you have this, this workflow, so does the human being who in
Yeah.
their professional opinion, that crown isn't just exactly right because it's not how they would have did the crown, right? So they're going to put their opinion into it via their handpiece or their high speed on their bench.
That's a great point, Jay. I hear it all the time from many lab owners. So you got the inaccuracies of glaze. It's an analog step. It's going to add some layers. And then we got, models that are 40 to 80 microns. So then we got a monolithic zirconia crown milled super accurate. Jay, which one's more accurate? And if something's off, if the contacts are tight when you go fit this, which one are you going to adjust?
The model. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like we're gonna immediately go back to the crown, make sure it matches the design, if it's off gross, and if it isn't, we're not gonna touch the crown. Yeah, we know that the crown is more accurate than the model for sure.
Absolutely. So then if the crown is more accurate than a model, in a model-free workflow with monolithic zirconia, we don't really need a model, and we'll just go model-free. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of model-free.
Well, and what we're finding too, especially with our condition today, most of the time they don't even get the model in the operatory anymore. That they just get like in the video, they just get the crown box. You know what I
That's
mean?
right.
Like, so it's like, a lot of times if it doesn't fit and they want to see the model, someone's got to go back, digging around in the back and try to find it.
So then, Jay, I think we're going to get close to Raptor 3, a very efficient, very simplified workflow. We're going to look at stain and glaze, printed models, and say, you know what? We don't need to do that. We can go to a polish workflow and have way better accuracy of our crowns with the model-free workflow. Let's take a look at a crown in the mouth, and we have many labs. I think you've got data that you've given us, 99% success rate with polished nano zirconia crowns going in the mouth. Obviously, that final 1%, temporaries can have issues.
Mm-hmm.
Patients have drifting teeth. I mean, you can't solve them all, but with the short turnaround time, you're about a 1 week turnaround time to your docs.
No,
On average.
I wish we had that much time.
What are you?
Yeah, we're
3
trying
days, 5 days?
3 to 5 days. I mean,
That's
from
amazing.
the moment we accept the file, we're running split shifts and we're just trying, I have stressed to my team, the faster you can get the restoration out of the lab correctly, the more restorations come into the lab. I mean, I don't care what kind of lab you are, high end, fee for service or PPO, DSO, every clinician rather have the restoration sitting in their lab waiting than wondering tomorrow at 10 a.m. are they going to have their restoration on time?
Yeah. Amen to that, brother. Let's take a look. Here's a nano zirconia crown in the mouth.
Yeah, but which one is it?
Yeah, which one is it? It's not this one.
No,
it's this one. Right? Look at the blend. Here's a natural tooth. Here's that nano zirconia crown. And then look at this nice light occlusal contact. Isn't it good to see and feel just a little bit of occlusal contact? Doesn't that feel good? So
Absolutely.
We're not making them a mile out of occlusion so they can super erupt back into occlusion.
No, it is as close as we can get to perfection and scalability. You know what I mean? For the modern lab to survive today, it needs to be able to figure out how to balance perfection and scalability. And that's almost impossible, right? They're oxymorons, right? Because there's so much work out there and there's so much going on, but there's not enough people to do it. And that's our biggest thing, right? And then it's tough is because America as a society, has kind of pushed away the blue collar jobs. And, and that's what a dental technician is, a really good blue collar job. And the amount of time it takes to invest in a person to teach them how to stain and glaze, they're not going to make, they can make more money at Chick-fil-A, Amazon, than they could learning how to stain and glaze from me. Now, once they learn how to be a dental technician, they've gone through PTC and training and to get their CDT. Now they can make some real money, but it takes years to master that. So there's a hard chunk, especially in today's youth, trying to get them in the middle and get them trained up. And the demand for the product, because we have another factor, Rob, and I don't know what you see on this, but there's not a lot of labs left,
Yeah,
right?
labs are shrinking.
Yeah,
Numbers are
yeah,
shrinking.
shrink. It's either consolidation or it's small mom and pops that have no legacy plan. The same effects that are affecting the baby boomer generation in other industries are really hitting our industry hard right now. No one wants to do this type of work at this level the way it's been done. So we have
Mm.
to reinvent ourselves constantly.
And that's what we're doing. Definitely reinventing ourselves here. And so I want to talk a little bit about polished zirconia as a category. Some people might think, well, gee, Rob and Jay, polished zirconia, is that really good clinically for the mouth? I wanted to reference Professor Markus Blatz, University of Pennsylvania, department chair, and he's published in over 200 articles on PubMed. Here's a couple of his posts on Instagram. One where he says polished zirconia causes less wear than glazed zirconia. And when you look at the data here, so same crown, one polished, one glazed. Which one has, better abrasion to the opposing? I mean, the polished zirconia is like nothing at 400,000 cycles. It's
Well,
incredible.
it's funny is, a lot of people, no matter what zirconia they use, and there's a lot of great zirconias out there and they all have their place in the market, but most people don't read the literature that comes. I mean,
Mm,
majority of all zirconia worldwide gives you the minimum prep, the minimum design thickness, all that, but they also literally tell you not to stain and glaze it. I haven't found one yet. So polishing, this concept of polishing zirconia isn't new. We didn't
no.
just come up with it a year and a half, 2 years ago. It's literally been the manufacturer's suggested way of doing crowns since they invented zirconia, which is unbelievable to me because like people look at me like I have three heads when I explain to them why we're doing what we're doing, and they're
Yeah.
like, well, why did you do that? I'm like, well, because we can read, you know?
I mean, this literature they started doing this research like, 5-10 years ago. I mean, some of
Yep.
these articles are older. This one here in the International Journey of Prosthodontics, this is the one that Dr. Blatz cited. Glazed monolithic zirconia crowns cause more wear to the opposing than polished monolithic zirconia. Then another study on zirconia wear with polished zirconia compared to feldspathic porcelain, same results.
Hmm.
Monolithic zirconia causes less wear than feldspathic porcelain. So the data is really strong clinically for the efficacy of a
Well,
polished zirconia surface.
and just look at the tissue too. Right, of
Yeah.
the traditional made zirconia crown versus the polished crown, because and we're going to get into this a little bit, we're able to take the margin so much thinner with our
Oh
polished
yeah.
zirconia, so we get
Yes, we
better
are.
tissue adaptation, right? So and that's a big part that a lot of people, because of speed and how fast we're trying to do everything, aren't as paying attention to as much as they used to.
Yeah, for sure. And Jay, you had made a point, which I agree. Every zirconia you can polish. So I
Hmm.
don't want to say Harvest Nano is the only one you can polish. I believe Harvest Nano has some unique attributes that make it best for polishing. But let's jump into the literature a little bit. So we have a super high resolution microscopic photo here. On the left, we have zirconia particles. On the right, we have zirconia particles, two different types of zirconia. Jay, if I was going to give you these surfaces to polish, which one are you going to pick, left or right?
Well, I mean, to be a little biased here, but I'm going to take the one on the left, but I'm going to use logic for a reason. With those particles being smaller, there's a lot less moving pieces, right? Like,
Yep.
like they have, or sorry, they have a lot less distance to move. And
Yep.
that's going to give you the difference there, and what we're seeing too, and these are subtle things in manufacturing that pay dividends to the chair. All right. And here's what I mean with that, design, with that patent that you guys have, we actually can mill things faster. We can make our tool paths more aggressive, so we save time there, and all our sintering cycles are under an hour because we're not moving we're not moving particles as far as fast. You know what I mean? So every little bit where if I can save 8 minutes out of the mill, 45 minutes out of the sintering, that all gets the crown up to QC faster, which then gets it into
You're
your
right.
operatory faster.
You're absolutely right. Speed sintering nano zirconia works really, really well. So the one on the left here, no surprise, this is the Harvest Nano Zirconia. It's very small particle size. These particles are 500 nanometers, about the size of tobacco smoke. It's pretty incredible. On the right, perfectly viable, clinically effective, isostatic press zirconia, just much larger particles. And I want to talk a second about isostatic pressed and what it is and how you do it. You have this big press. You can probably see this guy here. So it's like a 20, 30 foot tall press. And you put binders in the zirconia and you compact it down under high pressure. And the
Rob,
binders.
can you
Yes, sir.
explain to our guests what a binder is? You know?
Yeah. It's a material. I don't know the scientific name, but it holds the particles together so that when you press it, it keeps its shape because you have large particles and small particles, and you need to have, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You're going to compact it and you want it to hold shape. The binders is what holds it all together, kind of like a glue. And I know that's probably a very unscientific term, but you
What
press
happens
it
to
with binders.
what happens to the
Yeah.
binders in the manufacturing process? So after I'm done doing a design in my CAD software and I send it to the mill, what happens to the binders?
Well, the binders are actually burned out before you receive the disc. So
Gotcha.
after it's isostatically pressed, it goes into what's called a bisque bake at
So
manufacturing.
so does that leave voids in the zirconia?
Yes, because when the binders get burned out, what remains? A small micro
Oh,
gap.
gotcha.
Small micro gap. Now, it still works because when you crystallize the zirconia, the particles connect and come together and form a
Gotcha.
solid shape. That's where the shrinkage comes in. Those micro gaps close and come together. But this is where you can also see some warping happen. If you have a bunch of irregular particles and a bunch of micro gaps, and then now we have a large shrinkage factor, this is where if you're not heating and cooling the zirconia properly or you have other issues, you can have warpage in your shape, your geometry. Versus the Harvest Nano, we do not use any binders whatsoever. We grind the zirconia down to the 500 nanometers and we use a liquid deposition process where we pour the zirconia into the disc molds. We let it settle and we blend together from cervical to incisal, the different shades, a really, really natural gradient from cervical to incisal, no binders. So they go through a drying process after the liquid poured. And instead of burning out the binders, our discs just go through a drying process and you get a much tighter, uniform disc. And so let's take a look at two crowns here. These are polished in the green state. You can polish in the green state, which we teach labs to do. I know, Jay, you're using a different process where you're polishing with the auto polisher. You can do either one. But here you can see with the naked eye, this is just a DSLR photo, which surface looks nicer. Yes, they both polish,
Yeah,
but which one looks
but
better?
it's
It's
nights
obvious.
and days. The press zirconia is pitty. You can see it clear as day. Where our nano zirconia is like a piece of glass.
That is correct. And the picture on the right shows also why lab techs prefer to glaze. You're gonna have a smoother surface without having this like
You're gonna fill
micro
in
texturing.
those inconsistencies. And another thing that a lot of people need to understand is with our shrinkage rate being different, closer to a true 10% versus a high teens, maybe low 20s of the other zirconias, we're gonna get more yield per puck, making us
Yep.
more efficient, thus making us more cost effective, thus being able to make us more profitable.
Yeah, I think you ran some numbers that you're getting about 10 to 15% more units per disc with the nano versus the
100%,
isostatic
100%.
pressed.
Yeah, and then in our full mouths, right? We're now able to get almost two full arches per puck now instead of one per puck, and that's been a huge savings to us as a manufacturing
Yeah.
facility.
Yeah, that cuts the cost in half for all on X, which is
Absolutely.
huge. So back to particle size, one more point. Jay, you were talking about, milling accuracy. And, something that I learned not too long ago is that when you mill zirconia, you're not splitting zirconia particles in half. You're ejecting particles out of the disc. Under a microscope, it's just ejecting the particles with this burr that's spinning around at however many thousand RPMs, which zirconia is going to give you a more accurate finish line or margin line, the one on the left or the one on the right. I mean, it's a
The
pretty obvious thing.
Yeah, and what we have noticed right away when we switched to your guys' zirconia is, my mill techs kept coming back to me. He's like, Jay, this mill's like a wax. This mill's like a wax, not like a zirconia. And you can literally hear the rolling mills struggle less to cut that zirconia. Like when we would put in some hard, big zirconia pucks for our all on X, it sounded like that damn mill was working its tail off. You know what I mean? Now it
Yeah.
sounds like you got a piece of wax in there.
Yeah, it's a higher density, smaller particles closer together, no pits and voids. And, why does this happen? Why do margins chip? And it could be, a bad tool or a mill that has too much vibration, but it could also be that when you're ejecting particles, you ejected a couple large particles and they took some friends with them, and now you got a chipped margins. So then,
Well,
go ahead.
and this isn't scientific or official, right? Like we haven't studied this, but what zirconia is pretty damn hard, right?
Oh, yeah.
In its raw state, obviously it's more fragile because it hasn't been sintered yet, but it's pretty hard. And most of us are using some form of diamond encrusted tool, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what we have found is we would use every tool to our disposal in our CAM software because we're trying to get the best results out of, we're stressing, put less time into it in the green state and at the bench, use the manufacturing process to its fullest. So we're using like a 0.03 burr and it has the diamond, encrusted, tools. And we're having slight inconsistencies. And what we found is we were taking some of those tools under magnification and we were missing diamonds. Like you couldn't see it by the naked eye. So when I put two hard surfaces together, something has to give, right? And
Yep.
we're assuming the only thing that's giving is the raw zirconia. But sometimes those diamonds are giving, and that's going to change, the disposition of that milling tool. And that's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to lead to inconsistencies. So having a softer, if you want to call it, zirconia that still has the same megapixel strength, the same fractional strength, but that can mill more like a wax is going to save on the consistency of your tools as well.
It's basically like the difference of milling a sculpture out of a box of sand versus a box of gravel.
100%.
Which one would you rather work with as an artist? Give me the box of sand because it's going to be way more high definition. And what we're finding most labs
Can we go back to that slide real quick?
Yeah.
And this is just for some inside thought process, right? That crown's going to chip, right? And that chipped crown's going to be the case that has to ship tomorrow. And it's going to be the case for the patient that's going to Jamaica to get married and divorced all in the same weekend, and that there's no time to remill. So that lab is then going to have to center that crown as is, and then that lab is going to then add that porcelain back to make that margin and fudge it, which is then going to go out. And where do you think that's going to pop off in the patient's mouth 2 days when they're in Jamaica? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's just,
right
it's like
there.
soon as something gets, we call it the Mahoiks. Soon as it gets the Mahoiks, it's like the whole case goes bad. You know what I mean? It's unbelievable, right? And no one wants to put out an inferior product. But I've literally been on the phone with my doctor, said, "Hey, I had a problem, sintering mishap, oven mishap, milling mishap. Can I have another day?" And I've been told, "No, we got to get me something. Got to get me something. We'll make it right. We'll make it right when the patient gets back. But you got to get me something." It's like your back's against the wall, because what blows people's minds when I explain from outside our industry doesn't follow like standard supply and demand economic rules, right? Like, so when I explain to people that we make a custom made product on a timeline, they're like, those two things don't match. Usually if you're getting a custom made product, time doesn't matter. You get as much time as you need. It's like, no. I get no time. I get as little time as possible. Yeah. And I gotta make it look like God made it, which, good luck.
Yeah. No, I love that, Jay. That's a really great point. I mean, sometimes you might just have to make this crown work. So then, which zirconia would you rather mill? The high definition margins, and we're finding the average lab is milling isostatic press zirconia at around 0.3 millimeter margins, which work great, but you then have to hand finish those down.
There's
Right? If
not a
you're going to
lab.
mill,
There's not a lab in the world that does not take that right under a high speed with a rubber wheel and thin
right.
that out. You
But
know,
if you could mill margins consistently at 0.1 straight out of the mill, then you're going to get x-rays that look like this in a
100%.
model-free workflow where you did not have to burnish that margin or finish that margin down, versus the photo on the right, obviously a thick, ugly margin. No lab should let that crown out of the lab, but if you're in a hurry or just someone missed, just had
Oh,
to ship it,
well,
it could escape.
and Rob, what if that is your minimum requirement as a manufacturer, right? Like, so
Yeah,
even it, like, so let's say you're using a zirconia that requires that, because there's some zirconias out there that require 0.5, and then you take it below that, they're going to immediately push back and say you can't. So now I'm between a rock and a hard place, and then I'm putting that with the tissue in the mouth, and that's going to inflame the tissue. That's just going to add to a whole nother mess.
that's right.
This is getting us as close to back in manufacturing a PFM in a zirconia environment. It's like marrying the best of all worlds, in this
Mm.
process.
Yeah, I've heard labs say that the nano zirconia 0.1 margins, look like gold margins,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're just beautiful. So, I mean, this is I for sure would want the X-ray crown on the left in my mouth, and for sure not the one on the right. So, Jay, as we wrap up here, thank you for the partnership. Harvest Nano Zirconia is made in the USA. Dental Lab crowns are made in the USA. So, very patriotic offering for our domestic production with this workflow.
Yeah, and Rob, thank you for the time today. And what I can't stress enough is we developed this with you guys for the sole purpose of trying to produce as much here as quickly as possible to compete, with the big markets, to compete, for the DSOs and still drive profitability for the lab, right? And it's, there's no silver bullet in any dental lab, but this is definitely a tool that every lab should be using.
Absolutely. So, we look again at this crown, no glaze, more accurate, clinically better, going to produce it faster, quality is better, margins are thinner, more consistent. I really think this is an awesome workflow, and I know, Jay, you're a big advocate of it, and just thank you for the partnership.
No,
Glad
thank you
things are
guys.
going well.
Thank you guys. And if, as always, if anyone needs me, just give me a shout, 570-336-7724. That's 570-336-7724.
Man, you're a bold guy. I love it. Everyone's got your mobile number now. It's going to blow up.
Yeah, it's on our
I'm
website.
leaving that in.
Yeah, I never hide from it. I keep it on my website, So
I love it.
just always text me. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Well, Jay, thanks for your time.
All right,
We'll
guys.
see you,
God bless.
see you, buddy.